and criminals to justice.
Nearly 2 decades before Lauren Spear vanished from the streets of Bloomington, Indiana, another young co-ed vanished under similar circumstances, though the investigations into these disappearances couldn't have been more different. In the spring of 1995, Stockton, California native Kristin Smart graduates from Lincoln High School and sets her sights on a life filled with new people and new places.
Kristen was our family's adventure seeker. Anytime there was an adventure to be had, she was on the page and ready to jump in.
She wasn't a follower, she was a leader. She did what she loved, and she was passionate about whatever she did.
That fall, Kristen enrolls at Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo.
What were Kristen's hopes and dreams for the future?
Kristen had always been interested in architecture. But in another breath, she might tell you that she wanted to be Joan London and have the opportunity to interview a lot of interesting people and travel the world. No one could tell her that anything was impossible.
Even with a heavy course load and a full social calendar, Kristen never forgets to call home.
She called home every Sunday night. It wasn't in the cell phone era where you could just do that easily, but she wanted to talk to everybody.
The same is true of May 24th, the Friday before Memorial Day. That night, while getting ready to go out, Kristen calls home and leaves a message for her parents.
It was before she went out to the party. And the message was, good news, I'll call you Sunday.
Kristen offers no further details about her good news, which makes her parents even more excited to talk to her. But Sunday evening comes and goes, and Kristen never calls.
On any other Sunday, you would have called, but because it was a long weekend, made the assumption that she would call on Monday.
But by noon on Memorial Day, there's still no word from Kristen. That afternoon, her roommate returns from a weekend trip and notices something strange. All of Kristen's personal belongings are there, but Kristen is nowhere to be found. When her roommate starts asking around, she discovers that no one has seen Kristen since Friday. She decides to contact campus police. Later that day, the phone finally rings at the Smart household. But it's not the call Kristen's parents have been waiting for.
It was a police officer from Cal Poly Police who called to say that they had some concerns about Kristen and had she come home for the weekend. And that's when your mother's instinct kicks in and you say, this is not right.
It appears Kristin Smart has vanished, but despite her mother's concerns, campus police are reluctant to file a missing persons report or start a formal search for Kristen.
The campus police believe that she may have simply taken a holiday and they thought that she was just traveling somewhere.
By Tuesday morning, there's still no word from Kristen. So Kristen's father, Stan, makes the 250-mile drive from the Smarts' home in Stockton to the Cal Poly campus. Once there, he persuades campus police to put up missing persons flyers. Officers also begin collecting eyewitness accounts from the night Kristen disappeared. Nearly all of them place Kristen on her way to Fraternity Row.
Kristen suggested that they go to one of the fraternity parties. Well, a couple of the girls had a test they needed to study for, and another girl almost went with her but opted out, and they left Kristen at the fraternity house.
So she's quite familiar with all of these people, right?
She knew people that were going to be there, and she would feel very confident, very comfortable about going there by herself and getting home.
Even though Kristen is underage, she is openly served alcohol at the party.
I don't know many college students that don't have a drink their freshman year in college, and especially at a frat party. You know, most people probably are drinking. Was she a heavy drinker? No.
But according to eyewitness accounts, by 1 a.m., Kristen is so intoxicated that 3 of her fellow students had to help her get back to her dorm.
Kristen was found in this grass area Apparently, from this point is where they helped her up and started to walk her back to her dorm.
Campus police bring all 3 students in for questioning. They all tell the same story. Shortly after 2 a.m., they dropped Kristen off just a few yards from her dormitory before heading home themselves.
And that's the last that anyone's ever seen Kristen is walking towards their dorm.
But it appears Kristen never made it back to her room. Why? With no evidence of foul play on the part of the 3 students who walked Kristen home, police posed the theory that an intoxicated Kristen may have simply wandered off. But there are no eyewitness reports to confirm that theory. Days pass without a single clue to Kristen's whereabouts.
1 day goes by, 2 days go by. Before you know it, you have a map up on the wall in the kitchen to where you're marking locations of her last being sighted.
Not that the Smarts are giving up on their crusade to find Kristen.
Your heart is broken, but you can't let your will break because you have to be on your toes and you have to look for resources that can help you find your daughter.
The Smarts' efforts finally start paying off. News of Kristen's disappearance has spread throughout the region, and leads are pouring in.
They would get all these reports that she was seen in a drugstore, she was seen in another city. Wherever people said they saw her, my husband was in the car and he just drove to wherever that was. And it was all over California and Nevada.
Has Kristen simply run away? One sighting places her as far away as Canada. But like many others, it turns out to be a case of mistaken identity.
If you're a tall blonde, it's either, a curse or a cure because everybody's seen you.
The search for Kristen is back to square one. And the Smarts are beginning to believe something terrible has happened.
What is your initial instinct as to what has transpired to your daughter?
Well, something is just not right. She'd been harmed in some way.
In San Luis Obispo, California, Cal Poly student Kristen Smart leaves a fraternity party and vanishes without a single sign of struggle or foul play. At the urging of the Smart family, campus police enlist the help of the local district attorney's office. The DA's investigators start by re-examining transcripts from the initial eyewitness interviews. They quickly discover that one of the 3 fellow partygoers who escorted Kristen home, a 19-year-old food science major named Paul Flores, actually lingered with Kristen a little longer than her friends.
He promised the individual that was walking with them that he was going to get her home safely.
This new detail creates a gap in the timeline the night Kristen vanished, and means Paul Flores was the last one to see Kristen alive. This raises a huge red flag with investigators, and it's not the only one.
He had a black eye, he had scratches, which is not particularly compelling unless you're contacted by the police with regard to a disappearance.
Investigators grow even more suspicious when they learn many of Paul Flores' fellow students first noticed his injuries the day after Kristen vanished. They also tell investigators that multiple times Flores changed his story about how he got the injuries.
If he got them drunk falling into a bush, why didn't he say, "Gosh, I got drunk last night, I fell into a bush"? It's the lying about the physical injuries that makes the physical injuries far more compelling.
Because I didn't think it would matter.
On June 19th, investigators bring Flores in for further questioning and confront him about his injuries.
How do we know that everything that you've told us so far isn't really the truth? How do we know now that you lied to us? Well, that wasn't important though. Sure it is, that's important.
Flores now tells investigators that he sustained the injuries when he hit his eye on his steering wheel while installing a car stereo. One aspect of Flores' story that doesn't change is the account of his last moments with Kristen.
I walked with her to where the driveway was, and I went up to my dorm because the walkway goes that way towards my dorm, and then she started walking that way.
Investigators have their doubts. They offer Flores a lie detector test, but he refuses. Still, It's not enough for investigators to charge Flores with any crime.
If they go forward without the best possible evidence on a thin or weaker case and he's acquitted, then he walks for the rest of his life. He can never be retried. You want to have some compelling physical evidence.
But processing a potential kidnapping case isn't something either the DA's investigators or campus police are accustomed to doing. And on June 26th, the case is officially handed over to the San Luis Obispo Sheriff's Office.
We got the call that the Sheriff's Department would be taking over, which was just such a huge relief to us because our feeling was that professionals who knew how to deal with this type of situation were going to be on board.
Once on board, sheriff's officers bring a new urgency to the case.
The more time that goes by, the more potential loss of evidence, the more loss of memory or remembrance of specific information. So as time transpires, you're potentially losing information.
Within hours, deputies are combing the Cal Poly campus with cadaver dogs, hoping to uncover some trace of Kristen. They soon make a shocking discovery, one that seems to indelibly link Paul Flores to Kristen's disappearance.
There was only one room on campus where the dogs alerted, and that was in Paul Flores' room.
Cadaver dogs hit on the scent of human remains in Paul Flores' dorm room.
Right. So it has to be someone in the room who has touched or been near that scent of death.
All the dorm rooms, all the bedrooms, all the beds, they went to the corner of his bed and like trash can.
The smarts believe the odds that a cadaver dog would have incorrectly picked up the scent of Kristen's remains is slim, and suggest that either Kristen died in that particular location or died at the hands of someone who had recently been in that dorm room.
Paul's roommate on the weekend she disappeared was gone, and therefore Paul would know that he would have unfettered access to use his room. And therefore, Paul had an opportunity to get a girl that was under the influence back to his room.
It seems to be the break investigators have been looking for. But CSIs are unable to find any other clues in Paul Flores' dorm room. That's because, as the semester at Cal Polytech was coming to a close, campus police allowed the room to be cleaned and sanitized.
It's pathetic police work. It's terrible police work. They should have been in there with a forensic team vacuuming the room for fibers. And instead, they send in a maid service to clean the room up, and that destroyed evidence.
With no additional evidence, it is impossible for investigators to charge Paul Flores with any crime. So the sheriff's office obtains a search warrant for the Flores home in nearby Arroyo Grande, and they make another bizarre discovery.
They found multiple newspaper articles about Kristen under the mattresses.
One could argue that Paul kept those because he was directly or indirectly involved.
Still, it's not enough for police to charge Paul Flores with any crime.
What are the reasons investigators give you that Paul Flores has not been arrested?
We're told that the case can't move forward because A, there's no Kristen, and B, there's no weapon.
The Smart family believes they have all the proof they need. On November 26th, they file a civil suit against Paul Flores for the wrongful death of Kristen, hoping their case will bring the truth to light.
No one has any expectation that she is alive. She didn't disappear that night. She was killed that night.
But at his preliminary deposition, Flores refuses to confirm or deny the simplest of facts.
Did you attend a party at or near the Cal Poly campus in May of 1996?
On the advice of my attorney, I refuse to answer that question.
Whenever he was asked questions about what happened, what led up to that evening, he asserted his Fifth Amendment.
I refuse to answer that question based on the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution.
With Flores now silent, the civil suit comes to a standstill.
We don't have any DNA evidence, and we don't have a weapon, and we don't have any marks, and we don't have any witnesses. That's a festering ground for reasonable doubt.
that he's made the conscious decision not to share that information is like stabbing someone in the heart. It's indescribable. Just indescribable.
But investigators haven't given up. More than 6 months after Kristin's disappearance, they initiate a search of a nearby rental property that's owned by the Flores family. During the search, the woman renting the house hands investigators something she found in the driveway. Something that's been missing as long as Kristin Smart. A turquoise earring.
The earrings were her favorite earrings. They were never found in her personal effects, even though none of her personal effects were gone from her room. That's a very compelling piece of evidence. That's damaging evidence.
But no sooner are the earrings tagged as evidence than the investigation suffers another in what seems to be a growing list of catastrophic setbacks.
It was subsequently placed in a desk drawer, misplaced, and lost forever.
Without this crucial piece of physical evidence, authorities still have no case against Paul Flores.
Sometimes the smallest piece of evidence can be the clinching piece of evidence, and in this case, it could have well been the earring.
The critical loss of time and evidence seem to have done irreparable damage to the case. 15 years later, the Smart family is no closer to understanding what happened the night their daughter vanished. But like Lauren Spearer in 2011 and Natalie Holloway in 2005, Kristin's disappearance serves as a harrowing reminder of just how quickly a young woman's night out with friends can become a parent's worst nightmare.
Denise, there's so many similarities between Kristin's case and Natalie's case. What do you think happened?
She was taken advantage of, and I hope she accidentally lost her life. And that we can find her. We can't hope for what happened, but we can hope for the opportunity to, bring her home and lie her to rest.
Kristin Smart was last seen in San Luis Obispo, California on May 25, 1996. She is 6 feet 1 inch tall with dark blonde hair and brown eyes. Today, she would be 34 years old. If you have information about Kristin Smart or Lauren Spearer, please go to mylifetime.com/vanished and click on the tips button.
Every year, thousands of people immigrate to America in search of a better life for themselves and for